Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 24th Annual Barnegat Bay Environmental Educators Roundtable. My name is Becky LeBoy. I'm the Education Outreach Specialist with the Ocean County Soil Conservation District. And I'm here tonight with my colleague, Karen Walther, the Public Outreach Coordinator with the Barnegat Bay Partnership, who will be co-presenting this evening, Planning a Jersey-Friendly Schoolyard. And online, we're also joined by two of our roundtable colleagues this year, Christine Rabe, the Ocean County Soil Conservation District Director, and Caitlin Gannon, the Education Coordinator for the Jacques Cousteau National Estuarine Research Reserve. And Caitlin will be presenting our second webinar in our series of 3 roundtable webinars this year, which will take place on Wednesday, April 21st at 4:30 p.m. And her program is called Why Jersey Friendly Yards, or Why Jersey Friendly Schoolyards, Understanding the Effects of Fertilizers on Eutrophication and Coastal Acidification. And our third and final webinar in our roundtable series this year will be on Wednesday, April 28th at 4:30 p.m. How Does Your Rain Garden Grow? Presented by Dr. Steve Urgeau of Rutgers Agricultural Cooperative Extension. He is the county agent for both Ocean and Atlantic counties. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Karen's going to start us off this evening with an introduction to the Jersey Friendly Yards website, and then I'll follow up with a PowerPoint presentation taking a deep dive into planning a Jersey-friendly schoolyard. All right, take it away, Karen.
Sure. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to give you a tour of the website. First, I just want to give you a little background information about how the website came to be. So I work for Barnegat Bay Partnership. That's the National Estuary Program for the Bay. There are actually 3 programs in New Jersey. So for such a small state, we're extremely lucky to have 3 important estuaries that participate in the National Estuary Program. So part of our mission, actually the main part of our mission, is to promote the protection and restoration of the resources in the bay and its watershed, which is the land area that drains into the bay. We're all about clean water and healthy habitats and living resources, fish and wildlife populations. We do research, we do education, and one of the major problems, the major source of pollution in our watershed comes from everyone's yard. It's called non-point source pollution. It comes from everywhere. Fertilizers, pesticides, litter, all of those can end up in our storm drains, in our rivers and streams, and make their way down to the bay. So I'm going to just show you a few pages on the website. And this one kind of explains what I'm talking about. It's all about how excess pollution from fertilizers used on lawns is getting into our waterways. Now, this is a statewide issue. So let me just clarify that even though Barnegat Bay Partnership developed the website, it's actually for the entire state of New Jersey. So anyone can use it. There are a lot of New Jersey specific resources on it, including a searchable plant database, which I'll show you in a few minutes. So this page, kind of gives you the background of how fertilizers are polluting our waterways, what is eutrophication, and I definitely encourage you to explore, the reasons behind the website. So thinking of all these things, we did get a grant from the DEP to develop it. And I definitely want to point out that the roundtable host, Ocean County Soil Conservation District, actually started this whole initiative with its low maintenance landscaping guide for the Barnegat Bay watershed. It's still around. It's a great guide. And a lot of the website was based on the information in that guide. So we, the people who worked on the website, came up with these 8 steps, again, based on that low maintenance landscaping guide, 8 steps to a Jersey friendly landscape. So a Jersey friendly landscape is one, that works with nature. So you are using environmentally friendly practices in your yard, and these 8 steps will get you there. So the step 1 is plan before you plant. And each of these, I don't want to take the time to do that, but when you explore the website, each of these has a page of information with lots of resources that you can go to learn more about it in depth. Start with healthy soil, water wisely, all about conserving water in the yard and not over watering your landscapes, and being efficient in your watering methods. Fertilize less for obvious reasons, which I just discussed. Fertilizers end up in our waterways, and what happens when it gets there is that it encourages the growth of aquatic plants, including algae. And excess nutrients means excess growth of these plants. Too much of anything is not good. So when you have this overgrowth of plants, it can end up choking our waterways, using up oxygen, dissolved oxygen in the water as it decays. And, that's when you get fish kills, and it impacts the wildlife in our waterways, our rivers too, not just the bays. Being responsible when you're trying to manage pests. So that this step on that page, you'll find a lot of information about integrated pest management and using safer methods to control pests. Reduce lawn size. And that's in there because lawns are a very high maintenance landscape option. And so it's always better to cut back on lawn where you can. Lawns definitely have a place in the yard, but you can always reduce their size. There's a lot of unused lawn area. You want to kind of keep it to where people are actually using it. Create wildlife habitat. So this page is all about creating a place for wildlife in your yard, providing them with the food, water, shelter that they need to thrive in New Jersey. And the last step, reduce, reuse, recycle in the yard. There's information on that page about composting. So reuse the leaves and the grass clippings and all of that organic matter and even kitchen scraps. Reuse that to make compost that will help to keep your soil healthy and your plants growing well. So that's a real quick overview, and Becky is going to tell you lots more about that. And I just quickly want to show you a great tool on the website. There are a couple of really wonderful tools. So it's not just information. There's some really useful things on the website. The interactive yard is one of them. So just ran through the 8 steps. Now this page I feel would be especially useful in a school setting with students, because they would be able to practice the 8 steps by using the interactive yard. So I don't want to take too much time to go through it, but it starts with kind of a generic New Jersey yard with a lot of lawn, couple of planting beds, a few trees, but you can just look at that and say, there's a lot of places we could reduce this lawn size and add some plants that would be healthier for the environment. One of the steps is remove invasive plants. So I'm just going to show you how this works. So you would open it up and you start by removing them. And as you go, you're learning. So front entrance bed, these are the invasive plants that are in there. And you can even scroll over it and see where they are. So Japanese barberry, take that out. Winter creeper, take that out. And now you've removed those invasive plants. Then you start adding beds. So I'll pick one just as an example. You add a bed. So you can see you've taken out a lot of lawn there, and you start adding plants to it. Oh, I did want to point out that each plant in here as you practice has a little information icon that you can go to and learn about the plant as you go. So it gives you basic information that comes right out of the plant database, which I'm going to show you in a couple minutes. So let's add some cinnamon fern and a popsin, and let's add a Calorie Pear. Uh-oh. So there are a few plants like this in here just to make you aware that there are invasive plants and you might not know what they are. So Calorie Pear is invasive in New Jersey, should not be planted. And what happened is it's a non-native brought in as a landscape plant, very popular. But what happened over time is it escaped into the wild and it's displacing native plants that provide the food, the shelter, host plants for wildlife. And this does none of that. So that's just a learning tool in there. I'll go through this quickly. You keep adding until you fill the bed. And of course, you can learn about each of those plants. And I don't want to take the time to go through it, but you know, you can do a lot more things, add beds all around the house, add a pollinator garden, add a vegetable garden, learn how to have a low impact lawn. And then when you're all done, show you the completed yard. This is what you end up with. So if you remember how the yard was in the beginning, I added a lot of plants. And interestingly, let me show you another view. What this does is you've left some lawn, right? You know, that you can use to circulate around the yard or maybe for, you know, play, if you have kids or dogs. But you've taken out a lot of lawn and replaced it with plants, mainly native plants, some non-natives that are also very low maintenance. And you've placed them all around the edges of the yard, which is a really good place to put these beds to capture any runoff that's coming off the lawn. You know, it would capture the water, get it back into the ground with the deep roots of these plants, and that helps get water back into the aquifers that we depend on for drinking water, and it also gets it into the soil, which cleans the water as well. So it's a filter and storage. So that's a really good strategy, is to put it all around the edges. All right, so that's a fun tool. You learn a lot by going through it. And now to the plant database. This is the most popular tool on the website, and for good reason. So there are, oops, take that, rid of that. Over 400 plants. Becky's been adding them, so that's really great. The majority of them are native. And what you can do with the plant database is search for the ones that meet the conditions in your schoolyard. So let's say you are working on a design for a small pollinator garden at your school. You first determine the conditions, which Becky will show you how when she goes through the steps. And then you enter the information in here. So I will just, whoops, that just gives you information about each of the filters. So we'll just do a really quick example. If you have a special ecoregion, you can do that. You should really start with, should have done that, your physiographic region. So since we're in the coastal plain, there are 4 of them in New Jersey. And again, if you want to know more, you click on the question mark and it'll explain that. Plant type. So you have all these options. I'll do flowering perennial, but you know, you might be looking for some grasses, for some ground covers, some shrubs. Always a good idea to do native plants only, since they are the best at supporting our native wildlife. I won't do this, but you can select a bloom color, a bloom time, so that you have 3 seasons of bloom in your pollinator garden. There's lots of filters here. And the more you pick, the more narrow your list will get. Deer is a problem. You can pick deer resistance. I won't do that. And since you're having a pollinator garden, I think you definitely want to select one of the filters for wildlife, the bees and other pollinators. And of course, you know, through your yard assessment, whoops, sorry about that. You've just seen what, oh, I don't know why that's happening. That's not good. But if I opened that up, you would see full sun, shade, part shade, and you would pick that, whatever the, you know, situation is where you're planting the bed. The soil type, you need to get a soil test. And Becky will talk about that. And then the soil test will also tell you if your soil is alkaline, acidic, neutral, and you'll select that. Soil moisture, is it a wet spot? Is it very dry and well drained, or kind of in between? not a bad idea, especially for a schoolyard garden, to pick some plants that have a high drought tolerance, because that'll help them survive, when during the summer, maybe when they're neglected a little bit. And also, you don't always have time to be watering it. So pick low maintenance, drought tolerant plants. If the schoolyard happens to be in an area where there's some salt spray, or near a road that gets salted a lot, or even flooded in an area where there's some tidal flooding, consider picking, one of these filters to filter it for salt tolerance. When you're done, you will have a list. And with the few filters I chose, you'll see they're all listed here, and you can X one out at any time. You can clear them all out if you want to start over, but this is the list I just generated with those selections that I made. If you want to know more about a specific plant, you can click on the name and it will take you to the plant detail page. More photos, information about what wildlife it supports, when it blooms, all of that, there's all the details. And then, I'm sorry, I'm doing this kind of fast, but if you go all the way down to the bottom, this information is not really in any of the filters, and it's pretty important to know when you're planning any sort of schoolyard garden, how high it'll get, how wide the spread it'll grow, and how fast. You might want to know that information, and it might help in your making your selections. Back to the filters. So I should mention that when you go here, you can register or sign in to save your list. So here again is the list. Now this one, it looks like I've already added to my saved list. Let me add another one just for the fun of it to show you. If I click on that kind of blue plain wheelbarrow and it bursts into color, that means I've added it to my list. Let me show you the list. You can view your list once you've signed in. Now these are the ones I've added from various times that I've used it. And again, if you forget, you can, what was this plan again? You can click on it and go to the details page, and you can also print it, which is really helpful. This way you've got your list with the scientific name, as well as the common name, a little photo of it to remind you what it looks like. And that really, really is helpful. And this is a fun thing, again, for students to use it if they're trying to develop the plant list for a schoolyard garden. This is great. Just want to point out a couple more things, and then I am done. There are, oops, let me show you this. There's one page here on the website that has some examples of success stories. Really helpful, get inspired by reading some of these stories. And then Ocean County did some really great pilot projects. I would definitely check those out. There's a page about rain gardens, landscaping for pollinators, landscaping in the pine lands, how to avoid invasive plants. There's tons of really good information on the website. Really important, where to buy native plants. So, we develop a list. Hopefully, you get some kind of funding, to put in a schoolyard, Jersey-friendly yard garden. Where do I buy the plants? So go to this page and the list in New Jersey by county where you can buy them, and also some online resources where you can order them and the plants are shipped. Where to see them in public gardens. Tons of resources on this page. And just one final thing, couple final things. Ask an expert. If you go to this page, which I'll take a minute to do, and you have a specific plant or gardening question, you can put that in with an email, pick your county, type in your question. You can even attach a photo, and it goes to your local Rutgers Cooperative Extension office, and someone will get back to you with an answer. We have a Facebook page. Also, we have an events section. And right now, we are having our series, What's Bugging Your Jersey-Friendly Yard? So it changes all the time. We also did have a conference in October until COVID hit, and I don't think we're going to have it this year, but hopefully in 2022 we'll be back. All right, So thanks for listening. I know it was quick and I jumped around a lot, but I hope you'll take some time after today to explore it. And please, if you ever have any questions about the website, not such gardening questions go to Ask an Expert, but if it's about the website, click on that little envelope and send me your question and I'm glad to help. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. Thanks, everybody.
Great, thank you so much, Karen. And Karen, would you pass me the
Oh, yes. Sorry about that.
privileges? That's all right. And then I'll share my PowerPoint. Great, thank you. Okay, are you able to see the screen?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, everybody. I am going to share a little bit, I'm going to take a deep dive into the 8 steps to a Jersey-friendly yard and specifically relate those steps to planning a Jersey-friendly schoolyard. So Karen talked a little bit about what is a Jersey-friendly yard. It's nature-inspired, it's nature-based. So what is a Jersey-friendly schoolyard? So certainly it's nature-inspired and based on the natural landscape. It consists of the landscape at large. It might be just a small garden or an outdoor learning space at your school. It's based on healthy landscaping practices and principles as described on the Jersey Friendly Yards website, specifically the 8 steps to a Jersey Friendly Yard, as Karen just introduced, and I'll go over a little bit more in depth. And a Jersey Friendly schoolyard can manifest in various different forms and shapes and sizes. It can be as large as the entire school property itself. Probably you wouldn't want to start out recreating the entire schoolyard, but you want to have a grand vision. As you work towards your grand vision, do it a little at a time. It can be a small perennial garden. It can even be small container gardens around the schoolyard. So depending on the space and resources available at the school, every Jersey-friendly schoolyard will be unique. And Jersey-friendly gardens and landscapes are planted using what we call Jersey-friendly plants. And Karen explained that we prefer native to New Jersey plants because they evolved with wildlife and natural resources. So plants are adapted to our native soils and our native climate. But we do have many non-native species in our plant database, but they are not invasive, and we definitely recommend not planting invasive species, and in fact, we recommend replacing invasive species with Jersey-friendly species. And a Jersey-friendly schoolyard is a school community effort, and most importantly, is designed and planted with the help of the students. So here's a few examples. So several small gardens are scattered in one area of the schoolyard, and students are growing flowering perennials and shrubs and trees. And this schoolyard offers a nice picnic area and a shady outdoor learning space. And a mix of flowers and native shrubs and grasses create areas of interest for observation and provide food and cover for wildlife. And the bird bath also attracts and supports wildlife. A Jersey-friendly schoolyard might consist of smaller plantings, some spring blooming bulbs perhaps, or even containers of plants, such as these vegetables and herbs and flowering perennials that support butterflies and bees and other pollinators. Garden beds can be established by creating small planting areas where seeds or plants are transplanted and grown directly in the soil. And raised beds are another option for growing vegetables in a Jersey-friendly schoolyard. A mix of fruits, vegetables, and flowering perennials provide many learning opportunities for students. A Jersey-friendly schoolyard could focus on foundation plantings planted around the perimeter of the building. And this library provides an example of a raised bed extending the length of the entire building, planted with flowering perennials that attract and support pollinators, offering an excellent opportunity for up-close observation and study by students. Many times, foundation plantings consist of shrubs and small trees planted directly in the ground, close to the walls of the building. And this is a row of native shrubs called inkberry holly, Ilex opaca. The leaves are evergreen, deer resistant, and tolerate both sun and shade. And the ink colored berries ripen in the fall and provide food for birds throughout the winter. And often schools have an existing foundational planting. Many consist of invasive species such as Calorie Pear, which is blooming right now. You may have one or two or three or four at your school. They're big, beautiful trees with white flowers and seemingly innocent, but they easily escape our landscapes, human-made landscapes, and proliferate out in the wild and take up space where other native species should be planted or should be growing. So replacing invasive species with natives creates a healthier landscape and also offers valuable lessons in ecology. So step 1, plan before you plant. How do you begin creating your own Jersey-friendly schoolyard? Involve the school community in your plan. Dream big, but start small. And if you ask my advice at the end of this program, it will be to start small, but keep that grand vision in mind at all times. And look for inspiration when you're putting together your garden plan, and write down all ideas and sketch or draw them out. So it's really important to involve the entire school community in your schoolyard landscaping or your garden plan. You'll need your administrators, including your principal, on board. You'll also need the school grounds crew on board. The grounds crew may be the difference between a successful garden or an accidentally mowed garden, and they will be the ones either spreading the fertilizer or not, or spraying the chemicals or not, maybe eyeing up your compost pile or not, and try to involve as many willing teachers and staff as possible in your plan, as well as parent volunteers. And most importantly, of course, involve the students every step of the way. So again, dream big, but start small. So although it's really important to start small when breaking ground, it's also really important to dream big when you're assembling your ideas and your grand vision. So even though you may only start with a small 4x4 raised bed or some container gardens, or maybe just a mass planting of bulbs, or a few benches or a bird nest box, keep your grand vision in mind, even though it may not come to fruition until several years down the road. And the garden will actually grow with the children. And you want to feel successful, and you'll want the kids to have fun while learning. So do start small. But again, have your overall grand vision in mind. And that will help keep you and the students moving forward. And goal making is also a great lesson to teach the kids. So if you're not sure where to begin, look for some inspiration. So if you know you want to build a school garden, but you're not quite sure what kind of garden, how big, which plants to select, or what your overall vision is, get some inspiration from some other gardens. And you can do that by visiting the Jersey Friendly Yards website, and under the Create a Jersey Friendly Yards tab, the Success Stories option in the drop down menu will give you some ideas. And on the Jersey Friendly Yards Success Stories page, you can click on different tabs to take a peek into some other gardens to get some inspiration. And all the way down the bottom of the page, Ocean County pilot projects consist of gardens installed by various constituents whom the Ocean County Soil Conservation District offered guidance. So we had a fun time helping out lots of different homeowners associations and businesses and homeowners install Jersey friendly gardens. So they're there for you to take a look and get some inspiration. So for example, this garden was installed at a branch of the Ocean First Bank, but could easily be replicated at a school. And it's a Jersey-friendly demonstration garden. So it's designed to educate the public about beautiful native plant choices that they can plant in their own gardens, either at home or on public property or private property. And it's designed to be an extension of the surrounding ecosystem. The bank property is adjacent to public open space property, so plants were selected based on high wildlife value. And this is another garden. As I mentioned, dream big, but start small. So perhaps there's a trouble spot in your schoolyard where you can target your attention. And this small garden is located in a private yard, but the concept can easily be translated to a schoolyard. So you can see rain from that drain spout was eroding the soil by the sidewalk pathway as the water ran down the sloping front yard. And the installation of the small garden captured the water. It now prevents the soil erosion, and it also redirects the water back down into the ground, into our aquifer, instead of losing the water to the storm drain. And there are numerous potential curriculum connections involved in this relatively small project. And then the garden was planted with flowers that are attractive to pollinators, including purple coneflower and balloon flower, black-eyed Susans, and butterfly weed. Another way to look for inspiration is to take your students on a walk around the school property or to a nearby park, or even visit a formal garden. Offer your students cameras, or students can use their cell phones to take pictures, or they can take a sketchbook and a pencil and have them draw pictures of what they would like a garden to look like, or what they see, what they're inspired by, and what they would like to grow in a schoolyard garden or in their landscape, and write down how they might feel in their garden. And then discuss with your students an overall purpose of the garden. Students most likely will not have the awareness yet to come up with an overall purpose, so this is something you may have to guide them through, but it's an important part of the process. So your overall purpose will influence where you place your garden and how you design your landscape, as well as the plant species that you select for your garden or landscape. So do you want to create a windbreak or a privacy screen with the plants? Or are you simply planting for aesthetic reasons? Do you want to beautify the schoolyard? Or maybe there's an unsightly air conditioner, and to get your administrators on board, you can hide that machinery. Or maybe you want to create a shady spot for teaching and learning. Or maybe you want to focus on supporting wildlife in the garden so you can make observations. So think about the overall purpose of your garden or landscape, and what it will offer you and your students, and how it will connect to your curriculum. And the curriculum connection can be further defined through your garden's functionality. So think about your schoolyard garden or landscape and how will it support your lessons? So here's a few ideas. The rate at which water infiltrates the soil and how much stormwater can infiltrate during a certain period of time requires mathematical calculations. And soil testing involves examining the chemical, physical, and biological properties of soil, plant identification, insect identification, wildlife observations, and the interaction between plants, animals, and the abiotic factors in the garden. They all support environmental science. Many native plants have historical and cultural uses and meaning. What kind of habitat used to stand on the footprint of what is now your school? Was it a pine oak forest, a grassland? Can you recreate the historical ecosystem that once occupied the schoolyard? So nature is a thought-provoking and inspiring, and it inspires writing and art and creativity. So making these curriculum connections might sell your garden plan to other teachers in your school, and then you can involve them in the garden planning process as well and begin to build your grand vision. So together with your students, discuss all ideas and begin to sketch out and write out a plan. So be sure to involve ideas from all students, however big or small, so everyone feels a personal connection to the garden project. And a site map of the entire schoolyard will offer an overall perspective, whereas a plot plan just showing the garden or area where you will be gardening or landscaping helps to focus your attention on a smaller space. And on your sketch, include components such as a compass rose showing cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, and draw in the pathway the sun takes as it travels across your schoolyard, and mark which spots are sunny and which are shady, and for how many hours during the day. And this will influence your plant selection because some plants need full sun, at least 6 hours of direct sun per day. Some plants prefer partial sun or partial shade, 4 hours of sun a day, and some plants prefer shade less than 4 hours of sun per day. So this class displayed their garden plan for their whole school to see, along with their inspired artwork. So before you get too far along on your plot plan, however, you will want to select appropriate plants and write in those species on your plot plan. But before you select the plants, you're going to need to focus your attention on the soil. So step 2 is start with healthy soil. So don't treat your soil like dirt. It's the foundation of your garden. So one of the most important steps in the process of planning a garden is to really fully understand your soil. Encourage your students to get to know the soil, and you'll want to conduct some soil tests. The chemical, physical, and biological properties and processes of soil directly support numerous science learning standards. Invite your students to explore the soil. What color is the soil? How does the soil smell? How does it feel in your hands? Is it wet or dry? Is it smooth? Is it rocky? Is it hard? Is it crumbly? Is it grainy? What texture is your soil? Is it sand, silt, or clay, or a loamy combination? So have your students collect some soil, put it in a jar with some water and shake, and then let the soil grains settle. The larger sand grains will fall to the bottom first, followed by smaller silt grains, and then the microscopic grains of clay will fall in about 24 hours, all forming layers. And then you can calculate the percentage of sand, silt, and clay in your soil sample and use a soil texture pyramid to determine the overall texture of the soil. And this is important because some plants like sandy soil, like this native ground cover called bearberry, and it won't tolerate clay soils. It's important to know your soil texture so your plants are happy and you and your students are successful gardeners. Plants are also picky about the soil pH and the soil moisture. So collect another soil sample and test the pH in your school laboratory, or you can send it to Rutgers Soil Testing Lab. The link can be found on the Jersey Friendly Yards website. In step 2, start with healthy soil. The Rutgers Soil Testing Lab will also test nutrients contained in your soil, and this information will not only help you select appropriate plants, but will also let you know if you need to add fertilizer to your soil or not. So these are all excellent soil lessons, science lessons for students. And the soil test results that you receive from the Rutgers Soil Testing Lab will make another excellent science lesson. They contain graphs to interpret and information about macro and micronutrients, as well as recommendations regarding possible amendments to the soil if needed. So armed with this information and knowledge about your site's conditions, including soil texture, soil nutrients and soil pH, available moisture in the soil, and sunlight, you and your students can now log on to the Jersey Friendly Yards database that Karen introduced to you earlier. And using the searchable filters, you and your students can start selecting plant species appropriate for the conditions in your garden that also support your garden's purpose and function. Step 3, water wisely. Water is one of our most precious resources, yet we waste so much of it. So practice water conservation in your schoolyard with your students. Know where the water is located at your school. Choose plants that match the existing conditions in your yard so you don't need to provide the plants with copious amounts of water. The reality is, however, all gardens need to be watered more so at earlier stages during the garden's installation, with the goal of water conservation as the garden matures. So even gardens that are planted with drought-tolerant plants will need water in the first few years while they get established. So before you determine the location of your garden or landscape plantings, determine where the spigot is. Where is it located at your school? Is there a hose that can reach the plants easily? You certainly don't want to be wheelbarrowing gallons and gallons of water to your garden every day. Alternatively, or in addition to irrigation, you may want to build and install rain barrels. And rain barrels can be connected to the downspout of the building, of a shed or smaller structures, and collect water for the plants. And you can connect irrigation hoses to the rain barrel spigot, and that will provide a slow stream of water to the garden, to a nearby garden, or students can easily ferry watering cans to and from the beds using the rain water from the barrels. So unless you're planting in an area with consistently moist or wet soil, selecting drought-tolerant plants will greatly improve your chances of a successful garden. In these plants, sheep laurel, horse mint, blue giant hyssop, and butterfly weed are all also deer resistant. And deer resistant plants typically contain secondary plant compounds, which are chemicals that plants use to deter browse by herbivores or insects, but some may also be poisonous to humans. So please also consider plant toxicity when selecting plants for your garden. So do we have any questions at this time? I can pause for a few minutes and answer any questions. I can keep on going.
Hey, Becky,
So,
I don't see any questions, so.
okay, excellent. Thank you, Karen. I'm
You're
going to keep
welcome.
on going. So step 4 is fertilize less. So this is an excellent opportunity to teach students about nutrients. And based on your soil test results, determine if you really need to add any nutrient fertilizers or not. Addressing the use of fertilizers in schoolyards, as well as on municipal properties and at home, as Karen mentioned, is one of the main reasons why the Jersey Friendly Yards website was created, to stop the excess flow of chemical fertilizers that wash off from the landscape in rainwater or in irrigation water, and the fertilizers enter the storm drain and are discharged directly into our creeks and rivers and our bay, which causes great harm to our water bodies. And this is a photo of an algae bloom smothering the bottom of the bay. And this is part of a process called eutrophication. So that's an important term, an important process to teach your students, and the premise of why they are creating a Jersey-friendly garden or landscape. So eutrophication happens when excessive amounts of nutrients are added to the water, and then the nutrients are food for algae, and the algae quickly grow and reproduce, causing an algae bloom. And the algae actually prevents sunlight from reaching the bottom of the bay, and that prevents photosynthesis in plants who need the sunlight. And then those plants die, and bacteria begin to feed on the dead plant material. And as the bacteria break down and decompose the plants, more nutrients become available for the algae. And that kind of continues the whole algal bloom cycle. And then as the bacteria colonies grow and respire, they use up the oxygen in the water, and water without oxygen, that it's called anoxic, and this actually causes other organisms living in the water who need the oxygen, such as fish, they die. And we need to be very careful when using fertilizers when we garden. So hopefully you're thinking about the many curriculum connections, including the water cycle, water quality, chemical nutrients, plants, algae, bacteria, photosynthesis, the marine food web, and so many more connections that you can teach your students using eutrophication and garden and landscape connections. So over-fertilizing is not only harmful to water bodies, but it can also be harmful to our garden plants. Excessive amounts of fertilizers may cause an imbalance in the soil, causing other nutrients to become inaccessible to plants. Even though they might be there, they're not available anymore to the plants. And for example, too much calcium and magnesium may cause a potassium deficiency. So too much potassium can prevent the absorption of zinc. Too much of any one nutrient can stress a plant. Too much nitrogen may encourage rapid growth in the plant's leaves, which might be exciting, but the plant should have been directing this energy towards flower production. And rapid growth of vegetative parts of the plant may stress other parts of the plant, such as the roots, that can't keep up with the growing leaves and may no longer be able to supply the plant with the water that it needs. And rapid new growth can attract insect pests such as aphids, So it's important to keep a healthy balance of nutrients in the soil. Try using slow release fertilizers to correct for any nutrient deficiencies. Try organic fertilizers, which are naturally slow release. And examples of those might include cow manure pellets, bone meal, kelp meal, and fish emulsion. Consider adding organic matter to amend the soil instead of chemical fertilizers. Organic matter in the form of compost is really the ultimate organic fertilizer and soil conditioner. Not only does organic matter slowly release nutrients into the soil, it also balances soil pH and improves soil structure and water retention. Minimize risks when managing pests. So before you assume you have pests in the garden, find out who lives there and then support the good bugs who are the true heroes of your garden. A bug bioblitz is one way for your students to discover what kinds of insects are living in your schoolyard landscape or garden. So arm your students with nets and hand lenses and bug viewers or cameras and conduct a survey of all the bugs in your garden. So caterpillars provide opportunities for exploration and discovery and lots of curriculum connections to biology and ecology. Many teachers raise butterflies in the classroom or tag butterflies. Students use the scientific method by making observations, collecting data, formulating a hypothesis, and they conduct observational field study. And these are some of the butterflies you may attract to your pollinator garden, along with some milkweed bugs, all beautiful, all native to New Jersey. Step 6 is reduce lawn size. So think about the lawn on your school property. Is there a lot of lawn, just a little bit of lawn, or maybe no lawn? If there is too much lawn, you might want to consider replacing it with a garden. It will reduce mowing, reduce fertilizer and chemical inputs. However, you will have some other challenges with a garden, but enjoyable challenges, hopefully. Although this example is a homeowner's yard, not a schoolyard, the concept can easily translate to a reduction of lawn through a conversion to a garden. To convert the lawn, you can smother it with cardboard and mulch and wait out the winter, or you can use a sod cutter and cut out slices of the sod and create an instant garden bed. Create wildlife habitat. Install human-made features into your schoolyard landscape or garden. Select native plants when possible, as wildlife have evolved with and depend on native plants in order to meet their needs. Mimic nature as much as possible to create appropriate habitat for wildlife. So kick off an ecology discussion with your students by talking about basic needs for humans and for wildlife. Food, water, shelter, and protection, and a place to raise a family. Determine how you can support these basic needs in your schoolyard landscape or garden. Nest boxes, bird feeders, bird baths, strategically placed near classroom windows or in the outdoor classroom area will not only provide food, water, and places to nest for birds and wildlife, they also provide excellent opportunities for student observations. Together with your flowers, shrubs, and trees, these features can add high wildlife value to your garden. A brush pile offers shelter and protection for birds from predators. This Cooper's hawk was foiled by the brush pile this time, but she'll be back. Food chains, food webs, predator-prey relationships, animal adaptations for survival. There are many curriculum connections you can make just from a brush pile. So opportunities for learning abound in a wildlife garden. Animal classification, evolutionary structures and functions, energy transfer, plant and animal interactions, biodiversity, components of a habitat, ecological succession. A garden that invites and supports wildlife is inherently a rich space for teaching and learning. So dream big, but start small. Student interest may guide the direction you take in your garden, whether it's adding a brush pile or bird feeder, or selecting plants that attract butterflies. This native plant wildlife garden was designed by an Eagle Scout. And on this garden map, photos of each plant are placed where they will be planted. Each photo is accompanied by both the common name and the scientific name of the plant. The Scout selected drought-tolerant plants that like sandy, acidic soil and attract pollinators, including butterflies and bees, provide food for monarch caterpillars, and berries and seeds for birds. And finally, step 8, reduce, reuse, recycle. This step addresses two similar ideas: reusing and repurposing human-made materials and incorporating them into the garden, and recycling nature-made materials into the garden compost and mulch. So I'm sure you're aware that humans are super consumers, but we're not so super at reusing and recycling our products. Ignite creativity in students by asking them to repurpose old items in the garden. One of our Jersey-friendly gardeners, Phyllis, is very creative and a master at coming up with ways to repurpose old items, furniture, all kinds of materials in the garden. So here she planted common milkweed, and the plants were stretching towards the sunlight and she needed to kind of corral them. So she placed an old iron bedpost around the planting of the milkweed, and it serves the intended purpose, and it also adds kind of a fun and special touch to the garden space. And here she is with some garden art. You can see it kind of contains two blue bottles, one turned upside down, and a few other items that Phyllis salvaged and pieced together. Old shoes, an old tire, and salvaged items create some fun in the garden. And on the bottom left, Phyllis is showcasing two salvaged bowling balls. And I think the kids would enjoy Godzilla in the garden. And I apologize, the photo's a little bit fuzzy, but I wanted to share with you the creative use of old tires in the school garden in Egg Harbor Township. Recycle natural materials through composting. So composting means gathering together organic materials, adding water, mix, and then let the soil organisms break down the carbon molecules and turn everything back into soil. This compost bin is located at the Save Barnegat Bay Eco Center in Toms River. And as part of our Roundtable series this year, we're offering garden tours. And on May 1st, Grace Ann Taylor, the educator at the Eco Center, will be offering a tour of the property, including this compost bin. So I do understand that there is some hesitancy by schools to install compost bins for fear of smell or fear of attracting unwanted animals. but if properly installed and used, a compost bin will be 100% odor-free and attract minimal pests. Compost materials can include strictly leaves, sticks, and other what I'll just call forest vegetation. Or if you prefer, you can also add vegetable food scraps. Perhaps get a plan together to work with the cafeteria. All additions to the compost bin, especially the food scraps, should be buried within the compost. The compost bin should be mixed periodically to incorporate oxygen into the decomposing organic matter, which is what staves off any odors. And moisture should be added periodically unless the compost bin is already open to the elements. For an in-depth program about how to compost, the Ocean County Soil Conservation District is partnering with Rutgers Cooperative Extension to host a soil series of webinars. And our next webinar is actually tomorrow night with our guest speaker, Fred Schonagel, who will be discussing organic matter. And in May, Sandra Blaine Snow of Ocean County Recycling will be presenting on the topic of composting. So I invite you to visit our website, soildistrict.org, for more information on those programs. Mulch offers protection to the soil. It shades the soil and reduces evaporation, moderates soil temperatures, and suppresses the growth of weeds, who are the competitors for the moisture, and prevents soil erosion. Typically, mulch depth should be no more than 2 to 4 inches. And if you're mulching around trees, please don't create a volcano. It suffocates the tree. Leave a space for air circulation between mulch and the base of trees and shrubs. And mulch helps to get the garden established. But be aware of creating a mulch garden, just a sea of mulch and no plants. As you continue your garden journey, try replacing the mulch little by little with low-growing plants or ground covers. They will actually be a green mulch, and they will do the same jobs as the mulch, shade the soil, keep moisture in, and also provide additional root structure within the soil, which stabilizes the soil and benefits the soil organisms. So I'm going to turn the program back over to Karen, who's going to share a little bit of information about our Jersey Friendly Yards school certification program.
Hi, everyone. We have Barnegat Bay Partnership received a grant from New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection to expand and extend on Jersey Friendly Yards by creating a stewardship certification program. It's targeted for the Barnegat Bay watershed for now. So we hope to develop this program and then it will be a model to, send it around throughout the state. And there are 3 certification programs that we're working on. There's a school program, which Becky, is working on, and a municipal program and a program for residents. So the idea is that person, for example, a resident, you do certain actions and then you become certified at having a Jersey friendly yard. Same with the school and a municipality, they have a lot more actions they have to complete. But it's fun. And then when you're done, you receive recognition for having accomplished that achievement. And so we hope you consider, participating in that. It's still under development, so it'll be ready probably within the next 6 months. It'll be launched out. So look for that. We'll announce it and everything. But we hope you'll join us.
Great. Thank you, Karen. So thank you everyone for joining us today at the Barnegat Bay Environmental Educators Roundtable, our first webinar of 3. Next Wednesday evening, Caitlin Gannon, who is here with us this evening, will be sharing her program about coastal eutrophication and ocean acidity. And the following Wednesday evening, Dr. Steve Urgeau will be sharing his webinar how to create a rain garden at school. So thank you so much for joining us, everybody, and have a great spring and have a happy Earth Day.